My sister snapped her fingers at a 76-year-old woman who was holding a vase of white peonies with both arms. Sweetheart, snap, snap, the help eats in the kitchen. The woman did not move. She had carried that vase the whole length of the room without setting it down once, because the head table was where the flowers went, and the flowers were hers. 140 people heard it. I know the number because I had the seating chart in my hand. 140 people, and the forks kept going. Somebody laughed at something 2 tables over. The sound in that room did not change by 1 degree. I stood up. My sister did not turn her head. She was 26 that August, and she had a way of speaking to you with her chin aimed somewhere else, like your face was a detail she would get to eventually. Sit, she said. You're making it a thing. Nobody's dying. Then, still not looking. And take the tag off, would you? You look like you're on shift. I was on shift. I had come straight from the pharmacy counter with the badge still clipped at my collarbone, because she had told me 11 times that the photographer started at 7, and I was not going to be the reason the light was wrong. The woman with the flowers set the vase down on the head table. She squared it. She turned the fullest side out toward the room, the way you do when the flowers are the only thing you are being paid to get right. Then her chin came up, 1 inch, not more. She had been carrying flowers into other people's celebrations for 31 years, into weddings and funerals and hospital lobbies, always for families where somebody, somewhere in that family had decided to help. She had never once been on the other side of the deciding. The place was a greenhouse, an actual working greenhouse at a plant nursery off Route 4, rented out on summer evenings for people who wanted photographs that looked like money without costing it. Glass roof, hanging ferns still on their hooks. A string quartet from the community college wedged between the potting benches, sweating through their shirts. 91 degrees inside that glass at 7 in the evening, in the middle of August, in Ohio. Table 9 was not inside. Table 9 was out the side door, on the gravel, under a string of bulbs that hadn't been switched on yet. My nephew was sitting at it by himself with a plate of pasta going cold, 7 years old, in a clip-on tie. The place card in my hand said Table 9 plus guest. I had asked her about it that morning. She had answered without looking up from her phone. He gets tired, she said. Tired doesn't photograph. His bag was on the gravel next to his shoe. Blue canvas, cartoon rocket on the flap, the drawstring frayed where he chewed it. His insulin pen lives in that bag. The pen is rated safe to 86 degrees. 30 feet away, inside the glass, 4 bottles of Prosecco sat in a galvanized bucket packed with ice, under a fan. I walked out and took the woman with the flowers with me, one hand under her elbow, and on the way I picked up the ice bucket by both handles and carried it out and set it in the shade of the potting shed. Then I wedged his bag flat against the outside wall of the bucket, canvas to cold metal, where the chill would come through and the insulin would never touch the ice. You do not put an insulin pen in ice. Frozen insulin is dead insulin. I have thrown away pens for less. My sister's voice came out through the propped door, over the second violin. Perfect! Put the flower lady at 9 with the girl who counts pills all day. You two can compare name tags. I looked down at my hand. I had been holding the badge so long the plastic had printed a white line across the pad of my thumb. My name is Atlee Olmsted. I'm 29. I'm a pharmacy technician at a supermarket pharmacy on the east side of Dayton, and I am the thing this family calls when the bill comes. If you're the person in your family who gets called for that, stay with me tonight, because you're going to want to hear how this one ends. And when you get to the part where I stopped asking questions, tell me in the comments whether you'd have waited as long as I did. Here's the reason I sat down at table 9 instead of walking back through that door. You don't take the roof off a house with a kid still under it. That is the whole reason. It is not a noble one. That boy's supplies, his appointments, the phone number, the endocrinology office calls, every one of those things ran through a woman who could cut me out of his life in an afternoon and had done it before. So I sat on gravel and I let her have the room. And I want to be precise about one thing, because of where this goes. I can open that child's prescription history in 3 seconds. I have the login. I don't open it. I sat down next to the woman with the flowers and I set my badge face down on the tablecloth. The photographer came out to the gravel about 10 minutes later to get a shot of the string lights before dark. He worked for my sister's fiancé. The agency was his, 4 employees and a leased studio on the second floor above a bike shop, and the photographer was the one who actually held the camera. There was a client with him, a woman in a linen blazer who had booked the agency for a corporate thing in September and had been walked around all evening like a prize hog. So I asked him in front of her. I said the flower lady had been carrying arrangements for this family since before I was born, and nobody had ever put her in a photograph. And I wanted to make her a thank you album. And could he send me everything he shot out here at Table 9 tonight? Every frame, unculled, straight off the card. He glanced at the client. The client said, "Oh, that's lovely." He said, "Of course." I put the place card in my jacket pocket. Table 9 plus guest. I have it still. Then I went back inside for one question. My sister was at the head table with her hand flat on her fiancé's back. I asked her quietly, keeping it flat, whether the supply account had covered the censor order for the fall because the reorder window opens in August. She turned all the way around for that one. "Every cent of that boy's money is in that boy's account." Loud enough for the two women beside her. "Every cent. You count pills for a living. What would you know about what it costs to raise a sick child?" My phone was in my jacket pocket, screen down, recording, and had been since the parking lot. Ohio is a one-party state. I was one of the parties. I have never once been sorry about that. I went back out to the gravel. The woman with the flowers put her hand around my wrist and held on. "Stay with me until the toasts," she said. "I drove 90 minutes tonight to decide one thing about your sister." I decided it while she was snapping her fingers. Behind us, somebody found the switch and the string lights came on all at once, yellow and cheap and beautiful. A fork rang against a glass. My sister stood up and reached for the microphone. "I want to tell you what I promised myself on that gravel, because it was not a feeling. It was a date. 61 days. That was what I gave it. 61 days from that Thursday, and every person at the head table would be somewhere they had not planned to be. Here is the first piece of it, so you know I'm not selling you a feeling either. There was a check that came to my sister every September. It had come every September for 2 years. It was not going to be written again. The people who wrote it would send the notice 9 days after that dinner. The grant would not renew on the first of the month, and the reason was a form she never filed. She read that email on the last day of August. She told our mother it was a clerical thing. 40,000 a year. That was the smallest number in this story. The big one is 214,000. And there was a letter that went out 6 weeks before that dinner that nobody ever answered. 3 letters, actually. 2 came back with answers. One of them came back because the person it was addressed to could not answer it. Not anymore. Not for a very long time. But I need to go back to the blue canvas bag on the gravel, because before it was a bag, it was a hard case with a hospital logo stamped on the lid, and the whole town chipped in for what went inside it. That is where this starts. I'm the one who drove. My sister had him at 18. I was 22, working nights at a chain pharmacy off Wilmington Pike and finishing my tech certification on my lunch breaks. I drove her to every prenatal appointment. I signed as the responsible party on the intake forms because she didn't have insurance, and I did. I paid the balance in 11 installments over 14 months. The father's name is not on the birth certificate. I'm only going to say that once. In this family, I have a job, and the job is not aunt. My mother described it to a neighbor once in front of me as Atlee's the wallet with legs. She meant it warmly. That's the part I still can't put down. February 21st, 2024. He stopped drinking water and started drinking everything else, and by the time she called me, his breath smelled like nail polish remover and he was slurring. Diabetic ketoacidosis, pediatric ICU, 4 days, type 1, A1C of 9.8 the morning they admitted him. On the 3rd day, she pushed a piece of paper across the hospital tray table at me. A signature line, already filled in above it. "In case you need to run out to the pharmacy for him," she said. I signed it on May 8th. The account had been opened by then, and the paper was the card that made me part of it, and I signed it in a hospital chair with a pen from my own scrub pocket. The paper went into her tote bag, and I never saw it again. No debit card came to me. No online access. Statements went electronic to her email. For 2 years, I believed that account had never been switched on. Down the hall, through the wall, the infusion pump kept counting. 2 years ago, I asked her about one charge. $190 at a place I didn't recognize, which I'd seen because she'd left the app open on my kitchen counter. She blocked my number for 11 days. 11 days is not a long time unless you are 7. On day 9, he got hold of a phone at my mother's house and called me and asked, in the voice kids use when they've already decided it's their fault, whether he had done something. I never asked again. I want you to understand the arithmetic there. One question cost 11 days of that child. Whatever I was going to do next, I had to be able to afford the silence it bought. So for 2 years I was pleasant. I bought the school shoes. I drove to the endocrinology appointments and sat in the lot because she said the room was small. Then, on the 3rd of June, a Wednesday, I was scrolling a local marketplace listing for a used dehumidifier and the algorithm handed me a photograph of my nephew's tricycle. Kid's trike, barely used, $1,150. Adaptive frame, the kind with the trunk support and the foot cages, the kind insurance denies twice before it approves. The whole town had put in for it. There was a jar on the counter at the diner on Watervliet with his school picture taped to it. In the listing photo, the little brass bell was still on the handlebar. He rang it at people, he rang it at the mail truck. The seller profile was her fiancé's. I didn't call. I didn't screenshot it that night either, which I regret, though it turned out not to matter. I made a pot of coffee at 9 at night, and I sat down at my own kitchen table and I started counting. I stopped asking questions out loud on the 3rd of June. The next morning, I did what I have done every workday for 6 years. I walked in the north doors of the store at 7 for a 7:15 shift, past the floral cooler, past the coin machine, past the credit union branch that sits inside my supermarket between the customer service desk and the restrooms. 2 tellers, a rope stand nobody has ever needed. For 6 years I had walked past that counter twice a day. On the 4th of June I turned left. I told the teller I believed I was on the signature card for an account, and I'd like to know what access I had. She asked for my ID. She typed for a while. Then she turned the monitor a few degrees, not all the way they do. Joint owner. Signature card executed May 8, 2024. Full rights of access and inquiry. 2 years. The card had never been a permission slip to run out for supplies. It had made me half owner of everything that moved through that account, which meant I could ask for every page of it, and nobody had to tell her I'd asked. Anything past the last 12 months was archived. To pull archived periods, I'd have to file a research request in writing. $5 per statement period, 26 periods, 6 to 8 weeks for the paper to come back from the processor in Cincinnati. $130. I paid it in cash out of my own wallet, in 20s, at 7:09 in the morning, standing up, and I was clocked in at 7:14. 6 to 8 weeks is a long time to be pleasant. On the 6th of June, the trike sold. I know because the listing went to sold while I was standing at the register counting out somebody's amoxicillin. 2 days later, there was a barbecue in my mother's backyard for no occasion at all. He came around the side of the house in swim trunks with a hot dog in each hand, and his arms were bare. No sensor, not on either arm, just a small round bruise on the back of one and a strip of tape residue that had gone gray. I asked him where it went, and he shrugged with his whole body and said, "We do the pokey now." He held up his hand and showed me his fingertips like they were a merit badge. 7 years old, and the pads of his fingers had gone shiny and hard the way a guitar player's do. 10 checks a day, 10, on a good day, if she remembered 9 of them. That night, at 11:40, the campaign posted an update. A photograph of him grinning on a couch with a sensor plain as day on the back of his arm, and a caption about how far he'd come. I was wearing the yellow shirt with the rabbit on it. I bought him that shirt for Easter of 2025. I got up, I made a folder on my laptop, and I started at the beginning of the campaign and screenshotted every post with the date visible, in order, one at a time until the sun came up and my shift started. The kitchen clock in that apartment clicks when the minute hand passes 12. I heard it 4 times. He never asked about the trike, not once. He asked about the bell. He asked whether the bell went with it. And when I said I didn't know, he thought about it and said the new kid probably wouldn't ring it right, and then he went back to his cartoon. I stood in my kitchen holding a dish towel for longer than a person needs to hold a dish towel. That Sunday, my mother pulled into the church lot in a new SUV. 55 years old, sunglasses on top of her head, hand on the roof of it, while 3 women from the choir walked around the thing. Travel costs, she called it. All the running she does for that boy. Somebody has to get him where he's going. My aunt, my mother's sister, 54, came up behind me in the vestibule and put her hand flat between my shoulder blades and said, in that warm way, that this was a season where the family needed to close ranks and not go poking at each other. Nobody had poked at anything. I hadn't spoken in 20 minutes. They had already had the conversation about me. I was just the last one to be told there'd been one. 8 days after that, the fiancé posted the car. Not a truck for hauling gear. A two-door, gunmetal, photographed at golden hour on a road out past Germantown, with the caption about how the grind pays. The week after, a spa story. Face wrapped in a towel, 2 flutes of something on a tray, tagged at a med spa in a strip mall off Far Hills. Then, on a Tuesday, a photo caption supplies run, his hand on a steering wheel, sunlight, a parking lot behind him. I have picked up a prescription in that parking lot 40 times. It is the furniture store on Miamisburg Centerville, and I know it because of the light pole in the corner of the frame, the one that got hit by a plow 2 winters ago and leans about 9 degrees toward the drive-thru of the bank next door. Supplies run. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I saved it to the folder with the date, and I closed the laptop and I went to bed. And I lay there doing the only useful thing I know how to do, which is count backward from a number until the counting is the only thing in the room. On the 2nd of July, I mailed 3 letters. The first went to the credit union, following up on the research request, in writing, so there would be a paper record of when I asked and what I asked for. The second went to the foundation, whose grant money had been landing in that account for 2 years. I signed it as what I was, a joint owner of the receiving account, and I asked exactly one question, because one question cannot be characterized as an accusation. Had the expenditure report required under the terms of the grant been filed, and if so, for which periods? That was it. No claim, no adjective. A grown woman asking a filing question about her own account. The third letter was the one I nearly didn't send. It went to a name I'd read off the bottom of a donation card, one of the little cards they hand out at the fundraiser tables, the ones with the tear-off stub for your tax deduction. I'd had one in my glove compartment since spring. I read that line closely for the first time at a red light on Smithville Road. Contributions are tax-deductible under EIN, and then a 9-digit number, and then, in smaller type, a care of name that was not my sister's and not anyone's I knew. An EIN is the number that says an organization is legally allowed to take your money and call it charity. It belongs to one organization and no other. I looked it up that night on the state's charitable registry, which anybody can search for free, from a couch in a bathrobe. The number belonged to a small private family foundation, registered in Ohio since 1995, with one trustee, the same foundation whose grant money had been landing in that account for 2 years. It did not belong to my sister. It did not belong to any campaign of hers. It had never had her name on it in any capacity at all. The grant was theirs to give her. The number was not hers to print. Every donation card at every one of those tables told the donor their money was going somewhere it wasn't going. The third letter came back on the 11th of July. No such addressee at this address. The forwarding order had expired. Somewhere along the way, the post office had run it through a machine twice and the corner was torn. The name on the envelope was a girl's name, first and middle, the way you'd write it on a school folder. I stood in the driveway with my thumb over it for a while. Then I put it in the folder with the screenshots, face down, and I went inside, and I heard the mailbox lid drop shut behind me on the wind. The parish festival is the 3rd weekend in July, in the lot behind the school, with a beer tent and a ring toss and a folding table by the gate where they take the money. My aunt was at that table with a cash box and a clipboard. I watched her sign a vendor form. She wrote her name and then, in the line under it, she wrote a word and the word was treasurer. She is not a treasurer of anything. She managed a dental office until 2019, and now she does not work. I got a lemonade and I came back and I asked her, pleasant as anything, whether the annual report for the fund was posted anywhere, because a woman at the store had asked me and I hadn't known what to say. She didn't look up. Everything's handled through the accountant, she said. It's all above board, and honestly, sweetheart, the amount of scrutiny that poor girl is under, for a sick child. She had the whole thing already loaded, word for word, with the pauses in the right places. Somebody had sat this family down and told them what to say when I said something, which meant somebody had known for a while that I would. The last week of July, on a Thursday, I ate dinner at my mother's house, and the fiancé brought his laptop to the table and opened it between the salad and the chicken. Fixing the reach, he said. The algorithm hates flat images. I got up to refill the water pitcher, and I came around behind his chair, and he didn't close anything, because I was me. On the screen was the photograph. The famous one. The one on the campaign header. The one they blew up to poster size for the fundraiser at the VFW. The one my mother has framed on the hallway wall. My son, day 2. A child in a hospital bed, face turned away, one small hand curled on a blanket. He had the mask of a nebulizer strap across the back of his head. It is a photograph that has taken about $11,000 out of strangers' pockets minimum. He had the brightness up on the child's face and the crop tool open, pulling the frame in tight, cutting the room out. And I stood there with a water pitcher in my hand, and I looked at what he was cutting out, because that's where my eye went. To the window behind the bed, and the curtain hanging beside it. Little yellow sailboats, rows of them, the kind of print they stopped making a long time ago. I have stood at the loading dock of that children's hospital on every floor there is. 6 years of courier runs and pharmacy transfers and standing in the family lounge with a coffee. Every unit on the pediatric side has the same curtains, and they have been solid gray-green since the renovation, and before the renovation they were beige with a thin blue stripe. There has never been a sailboat in that building. I filled the pitcher. I sat back down. I passed the green beans. There is a version of me that says something at that table. She'd have felt better for about 40 seconds. The second week of August he lost camp. Diabetes camp, a week in the second half of July, up by Bellefontaine, cabins and a nurse's station and 80 other kids who all wear the same thing on their arms. He went in 2025 and came home talking so fast he forgot to breathe. His A1C in the spring after that camp was 7.2, best number he has ever had. He told me about losing it in the produce aisle riding the cart. We didn't do camp because of the deposit thing, he said. Just like that. In the voice a kid uses when he's repeating something an adult said in a tone he isn't allowed to question. The deposit thing. I called the camp office on my 15. A woman looked him up and was very kind about it. His spot had been held from February. The balance had gone unpaid past the March deadline, past 2 reminder emails, past a phone call, and the spot released to the waitlist in the middle of May. $280. I gave her my card over the phone standing in the alcove by the time clock and she took it, and then she went quiet, and then she said the session had run in July and it was August now. I said I understood. I thanked her. I asked her to put the money toward another kid's spot, and she said she would. Then I clocked back in and filled 41 prescriptions and did not make a single error, because that is what I have instead of a temper. 3 days before the party, the invitation came around by text. Cream background, a photograph of the 2 of them on a dock. At the bottom, no gifts please, donations to the fund. An engagement party with a donation line on the invitation. She called me the next morning and asked, in her sweet voice, the one she uses for about 90 seconds at a time, whether I could float the flowers for the rehearsal. The florist wanted the balance up front, and her card was, quote, being weird. $420. She'd pay me back the following week. I said of course. I drove over and paid it at the counter. Then I asked the girl at the register for a printed receipt, and she gave me one, and I folded it in half and put it in the zip pocket of my bag, where I keep the things I am going to need. The party was Thursday, the 13th of August. At 6:40 I came in the side door with the seating chart in my hand and found the boy already out on the gravel. They'd moved him at 6:15. His table had been inside, at the edge, by the potting bench. Somebody looked through the camera and didn't like the shape of the room, and my sister solved it. She solved it out loud, in front of him. He'll be more comfortable out there. He gets tired at these things, and tired doesn't photograph. 91 degrees under that glass and no better on the gravel, and here's the number nobody in that greenhouse knew. 16 units a day. That's what he takes, spread across the day, basil and boluses, off a pen that goes bad above 86 degrees. 140 people at that party. Not one of them could have told you 16. Half of them had donated. I sat down next to him, and he pressed the insulin pen flat against the side of his neck. testing it, the way you test a can of pop. And he said, "It's not too warm." I was checking so I wouldn't have to. Then he said, "Thanks, Aunt." And he said my sister's name, the wrong one. He caught it a half second later, and his ears went red, and he said my name after it, both of them, and went back to his pasta. That was the first thing that got all the way through. I set the ice bucket down in the shade of the potting shed, and I wedged his bag against the cold side of it. And I had not straightened up before I heard the gravel. She had come out, heels sinking, drink in hand, in a dress the color of champagne. She stood over the two of us and she said it again, louder than she'd said it inside, and this time her son was 18 inches from her hip. "Every cent of that boy's money is in that boy's account. Every cent. You want to see a statement? I'll print you a statement." And then, tipping her glass toward me, "This is a woman who counts pills all day telling me how to raise my son." I didn't move. He looked down at the blue canvas bag on the gravel, the one with the rocket on the flap, and then at the ice bucket, and then at nothing. And he stayed very still, the way you do when a grown-up says a number about you, and you understand for the first time that you are a thing that costs. She went back inside. He waited maybe a minute. Then he leaned toward me a little, without turning his head, keeping his voice under the quartet, and he held up 2 fingers. "She did it twice," he said. "At the flower lady, I counted." He had watched the whole thing through the glass from 30 feet away, on the wrong side of the door, with a plate of cold pasta. And the thing he took from it was the number. He learned that from me. I taught him that. When it gets bad, you count something. Somebody is going to answer for what that child learned in that greenhouse. And it is not going to be me who does the answering, and it is not going to be tonight. I got home at 11:30. My shoes were full of gravel dust. At 11:52, the email came in from the photographer. 406 frames, uncalled, straight off the card, in a share link with no expiration. 406 photographs of Table 9. I did not open it. I want to be clear about that, because it's the only part of this I'm proud of. I put the laptop down without clicking, and I sat at my kitchen table, and I took the place card out of my jacket pocket and turned it over. The back of it was blank cream cardstock, the good kind, the kind with a little tooth to it. I wrote 5 lines, not a diary, not a feeling. 5 lines numbered, each one a thing I could actually do, in the order I would have to do them, with the last one having a date beside it. I'm not going to read them to you. You'll see 4 of them happen. Then I put the card in the folder with the screenshots and the returned envelope and the florist's receipt, and I set my alarm for 6, and I slept better than I had in a month. I wrote 5 lines on the back of a place card that said "plus guest." The envelope came on the 17th of August. 10 weeks and 4 days from the counter in the supermarket, 2 weeks past the far end of the 6 to 8 they had quoted me. It was thick enough that the carrier folded it into the box, and I had to work it out with 2 fingers. 26 statement periods. May of 2024 through June of 2026, the last one printed the week that period closed. Printed on the cheap perforated stock the processor uses, 4 periods to a fold, with the account number blacked to the last 4. I sat down at the kitchen table at 4:50 in the afternoon with a pen from work, the fat blue one with the drug rep's logo worn off the barrel where my thumb goes, and I read them the way I read a profile before I fill it. Deposits first. 2 years of them. Campaign disbursements, foundation grants, the church, the diner jar, a middle school in Kettering that did a walkathon, and hundreds of individual transfers between $11 and $300 from names I have never heard in my life. $214,000 had gone into that account. I said the number out loud in an empty kitchen and it did not sound like a real thing. Then the other column. I made a mark in the margin every time I hit a line I couldn't square. When I ran out of margin, I started a legal pad. 61 charges over 26 months carrying the memo supplies. Not $61, 61 separate times. 41 of them at a furniture store on Miamisburg Centerville. The one with the crooked light pole. 12 at a med spa off Far Hills. 8 at an auto dealership in Moraine, including one for $6,200 as a down payment in the same week the fiancé posted the gunmetal 2-door at Golden Hour. Supplies. Then I went looking for what wasn't there. The continuous glucose monitor supplier bills monthly. It's an auto-pay, same amount, same day, and you can find it on a statement in about 4 seconds because it's the only line that repeats. It repeats 22 times. The last payment cleared on the 6th of March, 2026. After the 6th of March, there is nothing. No sensor supplier. No pharmacy copay over $11. No pediatric endocrinology. Nothing with a medical name on it at all, for 5 months. In an account holding 6 figures raised by strangers for a child with type 1 diabetes. He'd told me in a backyard with a hot dog in each hand, "We do the pokey now." And the $1,150 from the trike never touched that account. Not the day of the sale, not the week of it, not ever, in any amount, in any form. I got up and washed a mug that was already clean. The tap ran a while. The clock in that kitchen clicks when the minute hand passes 12, and I heard it, and I sat back down. I had been on the signature card for 2 years, which meant every one of those 61 charges had my name attached to the account they came out of. On the 22nd of August, the foundation answered my letter. Not to me, to her, as the grantee, with a copy to the account of record, which is how I got it. The grant would not renew, effective the 1st of September. The reason ran 4 lines. Under the terms of the award, a grantee files an expenditure report each cycle showing what the money bought. 2 cycles had come and gone without one. A joint owner of the receiving account had written to ask whether the reports had been filed, and the file had been pulled to answer that question, and the answer was no. $40,000 a year, gone, because a form nobody had ever asked her about got asked about. She did not read it for 9 days. She read it on the 31st of August, at my mother's kitchen table, out loud, in the tone of a person reading a parking ticket. "It's a clerical thing," she said. My mother said something soothing about how they always want more paperwork. Then my sister looked up at me across the salad bowl. "You should call them. You're good with paperwork people. You have that voice." She waved her fork. "Just smooth it over." She was asking me to fix the hole my own letter had opened, and there was no way on this earth for her to know that. And I sat there with a serving spoon in my hand, and I said I'd see what I could do. She has never once, in 26 years, wondered what I do all day. On the 2nd of September, I archived the campaign. She'd bragged about the gimmick at Thanksgiving, drunk on wine coolers, the way you brag about something clever. 1 post for every $1,000 raised. Donors love a milestone. 214 posts. I know because I saved every one of them, with the timestamp in the frame, into a folder organized by month, and the last one was number 214. Then I did the only thing I did in the whole of September that could be called a move. The foundation has a volunteer who keeps its photographs, an older gentleman who scans and dates and labels because the trustee is 76 and does not do computers. His email is on the registry filing, publicly, where anyone can read it. I sent him 3 images off the campaign, not the folder, 3, and I wrote 1 sentence under them. "Do any of these come from your memorial page?" I'm not saying they do. That is the entire message. No accusation lives in that sentence. If the answer was no, nothing happened, and I would have looked like a woman who'd gotten confused. I did not hear back. I did not follow up. On the 21st of September, I surrendered. I asked my sister if I could be one of the readers at the wedding. The poem, whichever one she picked, I didn't care. I said I'd wear whatever she wanted. Then I texted her, and I built the sentence carefully, because a lie has to be small to hold weight. I withdrew the report request. Don't think about it anymore. I had withdrawn a request. There had been 2, and the one I withdrew was the duplicate copy order I'd filed at the credit union in July, which by then had already been filled. She sent back a heart. Then 4 minutes later she sent this. "Actually, can you draft the thank you letter to the foundation? Something warm. You like letters." I looked at that for a long moment on a dark porch. 22 days. That's what she had left, and she spent the first of them handing me a pen. I typed sure. Somewhere out in the county, a woman turned her porch light off and went to bed, and a fuse went on burning quietly in a folder on my kitchen table. 3 days later, she launched a second one. Not a milestone post. A whole second campaign, with its own page and its own header photo, called a Healing Honeymoon Fund for Our Little Warrior's Family. For the honeymoon, in her son's name. She invited the hospital's radio station to cover the launch, because the station runs a children's radiothon every fall, and they love a local family. And she'd been on their list since the first campaign. And she asked me to take the photographs. Not the fiancé, whose entire business is photographs. Me, on my phone, because he was going to be in them. So I stood in my mother's living room on the 24th of September and took 40 pictures of my sister holding her son in front of a poster board. And before I started, I opened my settings and made sure the location and the timestamp were writing to the file. And I held the phone a half second longer than I needed to on each one. She noticed the pause. She read it as me being slow. Between shots, she looked at my blouse, a blue one, from the outlet on Springboro that I like, and said to her fiancé, not to me, "See, this is what I mean. She dresses like the receipt." He laughed through his nose. I took 11 more photographs, and every one of them is date-stamped, and I said thank you when we were done. 5 days later, she wanted $900. The text came at 10 at night. The boy needed something. She was between deposits. She'd get it back to me Friday. I did not ask which something. I sent $900 from my own checking account at 10:06, and in the memo line of the transfer, the little field nobody uses, I typed 3 words. For your son. Then I screenshotted the confirmation, with her name on it, with the memo visible, with the date, and I put it in the folder. The $900 went to a bridal shop in Centerville for alterations. I know that now. On the 29th of September, I only suspected it, and suspecting is worth nothing. That weekend, he stayed over at my place, which happened about once a month when she had somewhere to be. We had the fan on and a bowl of popcorn and a movie about a dog, and halfway through it, he sat up and turned around on the couch and held out his fist, closed, knuckles up. He'd been carrying it around all evening. He opened his hand. The bell, the little brass one off the handlebar, tarnished, with a nick out of the dome where he'd run it into the porch post. He'd taken it off with a butter knife the night before the trike went, because he'd heard them talking, and he'd kept it in a sock in his drawer for 4 months. You hold it, he said. You don't lose stuff. I held it. It weighs about as much as a quarter. I said okay, and I put it in the drawer in my kitchen where the batteries and the tape go, and then I went into the bathroom and ran the water and stood there with my hand over my mouth for about 90 seconds, and then I came back out and we finished the movie about the dog. 9 days. That was all that was left, and I had just been handed the last thing I needed by a 7-year-old who thought he was giving me a bell. The Radiothon is a 2-day thing every October. The hospital takes over a studio downtown, families come in, people call and pledge, and in the lobby they set up a display. Foam core boards with photographs of the kids. On the 5th of October, my sister carried the boards in herself. I was there because she'd asked me to carry the other end, and I did, and I held the door with my hip. She walked to the intern with the clipboard and handed over the whole set for broadcast use, the boards for the lobby, and a folder of prints for the on-air slideshow they run on the station's feed. The big one went on top, poster size now, my son day 2. She smoothed the corner of it with her thumb and told the intern to make sure that one got used. I stood 4 feet away and watched her hand it to a stranger for broadcast, in a building full of people who work with sick children for a living. And I did not say one word, because a woman who is about to be caught should never be interrupted while she is doing the catching for you. Then I asked the intern, when she'd gone off to find coffee, whether I could get a copy of the big one for the family album. I was maybe 20. He said sure, they had extras, and he pulled one out of the folder and handed it to me in a manila sleeve. I looked at it in the car. At poster size, you see the paper. That print had come off a scan, not a file, a scan. The soft grain that only comes off film, the tiny crescent of a fingerprint in the emulsion near the edge, and along the bottom, where the crop had been pulled in tight on every version I'd ever seen. A strip of white border with rounded corners, and a lab code stamped in orange. Rounded corners. Orange lab code. The kind of print that came back in a paper envelope from a counter at a drugstore with a 1-hour sign in the window. Nobody has printed a hospital photograph like that in 25 years. That photograph was taken on film. My nephew was born in 2019. I put it back in the sleeve and I drove home at exactly the speed limit with both hands on the wheel. 8 days later, at 12 minutes past 6 in the morning, a 76-year-old woman in Columbus signed a complaint under oath. I didn't know she'd done it. I found out the way everybody found out. She filed it with the charitable law section of the Ohio Attorney General's office, which is the office that can walk into a court and freeze a charity's money by the end of the week. She attached the grant file. She attached a photograph with a date written on the back in ballpoint, the 18th of November, 1994. And she sent a copy to the crowdfunding platform, which has an email address for exactly this, and answers it in hours. She did it because it was hers. Her foundation's name was on those donation cards. Her 9-digit tax number was on the deduction line. Every stranger who tore off a stub at the VFW and wrote it on their return had been told the money went to her, and she had never authorized $1 of it. And using somebody else's number to collect money is not a paperwork mistake, it is a felony. I had never asked her for anything. I asked a volunteer with a scanner one question in September and told him I wasn't saying anything, and he did what volunteers do, which is take it upstairs. And she had driven 90 minutes with a vase of white peonies in the footwell of her car to look at my sister once, in person, before she decided. She'd decided while my sister was snapping her fingers. I learned all of that later. What I did that morning was walk into work. 7 o'clock, the 13th of October, 61 days from the gravel. I came in the north doors, past the floral cooler and the coin machine, and for 6 years I have gone straight on past the little credit union branch, between customer service and the restrooms. That morning I turned left. I put 2 things on the glass: my driver's license and a copy of the signature card, executed the 8th of May, 2024, with my own handwriting on it. I told the teller I was exercising my right as a joint owner, and I wanted a 2-signature requirement placed on the account. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every card charge over any amount. 2 owners sign, or it doesn't move. She got the branch manager. He read the card. He called it a dual control hold and said it was a thing. Their own policy let any joint owner ask for, on any joint account, without a reason and without notice to the other owner. He asked me twice if I understood I was doing this to an account I shared, and I said I did. He said the debit card on it would go locked within the hour, because a card is a withdrawal that doesn't wait for a signature. It took 11 minutes and it cost nothing. That was line 4. It was the one with the date beside it. I did not withdraw $1. Not the $900 she owed me. Not the $420 for the flowers. Not a cent. If I had taken money out of that account, everything that came after would have been a family fight about a woman who took money. The manager slid the form across and asked if I'd rather just close it out. No, I said, I want it to stop moving. The radiothon went live at 7:30. I listened to it in my car in the store lot on my break, with the windows down, because it was one of those October mornings that can't decide. At Nini 20, the host's voice changed. You could hear it happen. He'd been doing the warm register all morning, and then there was a beat of air, and he came back a half-tone flatter and said they were going to take a short break from the family segments. Somebody had called the switchboard. Then somebody else had. And by 9:20, the hospital's own foundation coordinator was standing in the studio in a lanyard, off mic, waiting. My sister was scheduled for 9:40. She never went on. What she got instead, at 9:51, was an automated email on her phone while she sat in the green room with a coffee. Her campaign had been paused pending review, all withdrawals held, donors notified, in accordance with the platform's terms. The terms nobody reads, the ones you agree to when you click the box. Both campaigns, the boys and the honeymoon. At 11:40, her card was declined at the dealership in Moraine, where she had gone directly from the studio to put money down on a second vehicle, because the day was already ruined and she wanted something. The card wasn't declined for insufficient funds. There were funds. It was declined because 4 hours earlier the account it drew on had gone to 2 signatures, and the card had been locked along with it, and only one person was standing at that counter. I was at work. I was filling a blood pressure medication for a man who tells me about his roses. I want to say I felt it happen. I didn't. I labeled the bottle, I checked the dose, I initialed it, and somewhere across town a card reader beeped twice. By that night I had 19 missed calls. 19, between 4:10 and 11, from 4 numbers. The family group chat went to 200 messages and then somebody added me back into it so I could see them. The 2 words that came up most were jealous and bitter. My aunt typed a paragraph about how some people cannot stand to see a young mother get an ounce of grace. My mother typed nothing in the chat, which was not mercy. She came in person. She walked into my store at 1:15 on Wednesday, past the floral cooler, and stood at the pharmacy counter in the pickup line behind 2 people and waited her turn. And when she got to the glass, she said it loud enough for the aisle. She said that she had 2 daughters, and one of them had given her a grandchild, and the other one had given her a lifetime of receipts, and that she'd always known which one loved her, and now everybody would. My shift manager was standing at the register 6 feet away with a clipboard. I said, "Ma'am, is there a prescription I can help you find?" She left. The man behind her in line looked at the floor. I badged back in at 1:19. I filled 38 scripts that afternoon and did not make a single error. Some people are a bill that comes due later. She came the next morning, both of them. 9:40, the middle of my shift, in through the north doors, past the floral cooler, and they did not come to the pharmacy counter. They went to the credit union. I could see the whole thing from where I stand. It's 60 feet of open floor between my counter and that rope stand, and there is nothing between us but a display of birthday balloons. She had a printout in her hand. She wanted the 2-signature order taken off, and when the teller said she'd get the manager, my sister said she'd like it taken off now, please. And then she said it again without the please. The manager came out from the back. He is a soft-spoken man of about 50 who wears a tie clip. I explained it to her the way you explain a rule to somebody who has decided the rule is a person. A joint owner cannot be removed by the other joint owner. Either both owners sign the removal, or a court tells us to. Those are the two ways. There is not a third. She turned around and looked across 60 feet of floor at me. The fiancé said something to the manager with his hands out, the reasonable guy posture, and the manager said the same sentence again in the same voice. Then she walked the 60 feet, past the balloons, and stood at my glass in the pickup line with a form and a pen and said, "Sign it." My shift manager was 4 feet behind me pretending to count something. I said no. She said what kind of person. She said her son's money. She said the word hostage, which is a word I have thought about a lot since. She got loud enough that a man in the vitamins aisle looked over. And she did every second of it standing under the black dome camera that hangs over the pharmacy counter, in a store that keeps its footage 90 days, 60 feet from a branch that keeps its own. She left the form on my counter. I didn't touch it. At 9:58, the overhead speaker asked for a price check in aisle 12, and I went back to the queue, and the queue was 14 deep. That same afternoon, the Attorney General's office filed in court, and the filing had his name in it. Not as a witness. As a defendant, alongside her, because the photographs had been prepared, edited, and distributed by his agency, from his equipment, with his invoices in the file. And because a civil complaint by that office is a public document that anybody can pull up on a county website in about 9 seconds. His clients pulled it up. The first one dropped him on the 15th, an hour after it hit the docket. The second on the 16th. The third, the woman in the linen blazer, the one who had stood on the gravel and said, "Oh, that's lovely," terminated on the 17th by email and copied her own attorney. 48 hours, 3 of his 4 accounts. A leased studio above a bike shop with 14 months left on it. He came to my mother's for dinner on the 18th because he had nowhere else to be, and he sat down and didn't eat anything, and then he put both hands flat on the table and turned to my sister. "You told me the photos were yours." She said, "They are ours." He looked at her for a long moment, and then he asked her a second question, quieter, and she didn't answer that one at all. The parish moved that same week. My aunt was removed from the festival committee, from the school's fundraising board, and from the parent-teacher organization she'd chaired for 6 years. Not because anyone accused her of taking $1, but because her signature was in the Attorney General's exhibits with the word treasurer under it, and no parish council on earth is going to let a woman near a cash box after that. She called me at 11 at night, crying, and said she hadn't understood what she was signing. I believed her, actually. That's the strange part. Then, 4 minutes into the same phone call, she asked me how I could do this to family, and I understood that she'd been crying about herself the entire time, and I said goodnight. On the 20th, my mother listed the SUV. It sat in the church lot on Sunday with a paper sign in the back window, and the price on the sign came down twice before anybody called. There is a thing I did that week that nobody in my family knows about, and I only tell you because it is the reason I can still sleep. On account under a 2-signature order is an account where nothing moves. That includes the good things. So on the 14th of October, I called the durable medical equipment supplier, the one that hadn't been paid since March, whose autopay had been dead for 7 months. And I got a woman in Indiana on the phone, and I asked her what it would take to put that child's standing supply order back into active status and keep it there through the end of the year. $1,200, she said, to clear the lapse and prepay the quarter. I gave her my card, my checking, my problem. She asked whose account to note it under, and I said it didn't matter, note it under his, and she said most people want their name on it, and I said I know. I got a box on his porch 9 days later with 3 months of sensors in it. As far as he knows, the box comes from the sky. The investigator called me the same week. She was careful and slow, and she said everything twice, and about 20 minutes in she asked whether, given where I worked, I had any way to obtain the child's prescription fill history, because a gap in fills would show the court exactly when the medicine stopped. I told her the truth. I can open that child's prescription history in 3 seconds. I have the login. I don't open it. I said it just like that, in the same words, because it is the sentence I keep whole so I don't wear it down. Then I told her that a pharmacy technician who pulls a patient record for a family lawsuit is a technician who has committed a federal privacy violation, lost her certification, and handed the defense the only thing they'd need, which is one person on my side of it who cheated. She was quiet, and then she said, "Understood." And she meant it differently than people usually mean it. I gave her what I had the right to give. 26 statement periods with my own name on the signature card. The 61 supplies lines, the March gap, 214 date-stamped posts, a transfer memo, a florist's receipt, a recording I was a party to, 406 frames of a child eating alone on gravel while 140 people ate inside, 51 photographs with the location written into the file, nothing I wasn't a party to. On the 19th, somebody in that office floated an idea by email, a short video, the boy, on camera, talking about the finger sticks. It would move a judge, they said, and it would move the public, and the public is what makes an office like that move fast. I typed my answer and read it twice before I sent it. No, not on camera, not in a photograph, not named in a press release, not now and not after. He has already been a fundraising asset once in his life, and I am not going to be the second person to do it to him for a better outcome. I understood what I was giving up. A case moves slower when it's paper. I sent it anyway, and then I sat on my back step in the cold with my coat over my knees, and for the first time in 5 months my hands were steady. She came to my door on the 22nd. The woman with the flowers. 76 years old, in a wool coat, with a shoebox under one arm and a manila envelope in her hand, standing on my landing, because she had gotten my address off a letter I'd mailed her in July. The trustee. One trustee, registered since 1995, the name on the deduction line of every card at every table. She'd been carrying flowers to strangers for 31 years for a reason. I had not once thought to ask what the reason was. She sat at my kitchen table and opened the shoebox, and it was full of letters. Handwritten ones, hundreds, rubber-banded by year, from families the foundation had paid for, surgeries, hotel rooms near hospitals, a wheelchair van, a summer camp deposit. She reads all of them. She answers all of them. Then she slid the envelope across. It was a photograph with rounded white corners and an orange lab coat along the bottom edge. A child in a hospital bed, face turned away, one small hand curled on a blanket, a nebulizer strap across the back of her head. Not a boy, a girl, 9 years old. Behind the bed, a window, and beside the window, a curtain printed with rows of small yellow sailboats. Same room, same bed, same blanket, same hand. On the back, in ballpoint, in a young woman's handwriting, the 18th of November, 1994. The photograph on my mother's hallway wall, the one on the poster board at the VFW, the one that had gone out over the air, cropped to cut the sailboats out of the frame. $11,000 minimum out of strangers' pockets. They had not been stealing money. They had been taking a child who died 31 years ago and putting her face on a fundraiser, over and over, for 2 years. The old woman put her hand flat on the table and she said, "I have looked at that photograph every day of my life." And her voice did not shake, and mine was gone entirely. He asked me about it 4 days later. We were in my car outside the library, and he was doing the buckle, and he said it the way kids ask the enormous ones, sideways, into the window. Why was my picture on the radio if I don't remember that room? I could have said it was a different hospital. I could have said he was too little. there was a sentence available and I could see the whole shape of it. I said, "That's a real question and you should keep it." He said, "But whose room is it?" I said, "That's not mine to tell you. Somebody's going to tell you. It won't be a secret forever." I thought about that with his chin down for 11 seconds, and then he said, "Okay," in the flat little voice they use when a thing is not okay, and they have decided not to make you carry it. He turned the radio on himself. He picked a station with no talking on it. Neither of us said anything the whole way to the library, and he read 3 books about sharks. And when I dropped him off, he said thank you at the door like a small adult. The court order came down on the 27th. A judge in Franklin County signed a temporary restraining order, which in plain terms means the money stopped being hers that afternoon. Every remaining dollar frozen where it sat, and a sworn accounting due, line by line, for where the rest went. The rest was $11,300. Out of $214,000. 2 years of walkathons and church envelopes and a jar on a diner counter with a school picture taped to it. And what was left was $11,300 and a 2-door with a lien on it. The same day, the platform posted a notice on both campaign pages, refunded what it could reach, and took the pages down. And the criminal side of the file went back down I-70 to the prosecutor's office in Montgomery County. Because a frozen account is a civil matter, and using somebody else's charitable registration number to collect money is not. Her phone stopped ringing all at once. That's the part she told my mother about. Not the freeze, the silence. The jar came off the counter at the diner on Watervliet in the first week of November. It had been there since the spring of 2024, with his school picture taped to the front of it, the one where his tooth is out. People put their change in it. Truck drivers put in 5s. The owner took it down and washed it out and put it in the back, and taped a piece of paper to the register that said the fund was under review by the state and that anyone with questions could call a number. And she printed the number in a font too big for the paper. I found out because a woman called my pharmacy. She got the store's main line and asked for me by name, and the clerk transferred it, and I took it in the alcove by the time clock with my gloves still on. She had organized the walkathon at the middle school in Kettering. 6th graders. They did laps around a track in April of last year and raised $4,300 in pledges of $2 and $5 from grandparents, and she had driven the check over herself. She wasn't angry, that was the thing. She kept apologizing for calling. She said the kids were asking. She said one of them had made a poster. She said she just needed to know if any of it had bought anything. A sensor, a copay, 1 box of anything. Because she had to stand up in front of a room of 12-year-olds and say something true. I sat down on the milk crate we keep by the time clock. I told her the honest answer, which is that I did not know yet. That a court was going to make somebody write it down, line by line. And that when it was written down, I would find out and I would call her back. She thanked me. She said she'd tell them it was being looked into. I wrote her number on the back of a label sheet and put it in my wallet behind my license. And it is still there. I called her in March, when the accounting was finally written down. The number I had for her was 0. Not 1 box, not 1 copay, not 1 test strip, out of $4,300 walked in circles around a track by 6th graders. She had to carry that into a classroom. She came to my apartment on the 1st of November. She had done her face. She sat on my couch with her knees together, and she cried in a way I have watched her do since she was 9, and then she got to it. She said I had done this to a child. She said whatever she'd done, whatever mistakes, he was the one who'd pay, and could I live with that? And what kind of woman does that to her own nephew? I let her finish. She wanted a fight, because a fight is a thing you can lose loudly and then be the victim of. I went to the drawer, and I took out 1 sheet of paper, and I put it on the coffee table in front of her, face up. A screenshot of a bank transfer. $900, the 29th of September. Her name in the recipient field. And in the memo line, 3 words, for your son. That's the last money I ever sent you, I said. Tell me what it bought. She looked at it for a long time. Then she picked up her bag and left, and she did not close the door behind her. The wedding was supposed to be the 14th of November. It did not happen. The venue kept the deposit under the 90-day cancellation clause, which is a polite way of saying they kept $4,000 and rebooked the date inside a week. The agency filed its dissolution on the 30th of October, and the studio above the bike shop had a for lease sign in the window by Thanksgiving. She told the family I sold them for attention. That's the version. That's what my cousins believe. Their aunt got greedy for sympathy, went to the government about her own sister, and blew up a wedding. My mother had to pick, and she did it fast, which I appreciate more than I expected to. Somebody at that table is going to be alone at Christmas, and it is not going to be the person they think. Then in the second week of November, a caseworker opened a file. Children's services, medical neglect, the March gap, the 8 months with no censors, the camp fee, the A1C. They interviewed him at school, in a soft room with a woman who does that for a living. My sister got to him first. She told him, in the car, that his aunt had called the government on his mother, and that everything happening in his house was because of me. I did not answer my calls for 9 days. I called at the same time each evening, 6:15, and let it go to voicemail, and left a short one about nothing. The weather, a dog I saw. 9 of those. The bell is in the drawer in my kitchen with the batteries and the tape. I opened that drawer 9 times looking for other things. The case plan meeting was the 4th of December, in a county building with a table too big for the room. The caseworker, my sister, my mother, my aunt, who came because nobody told her not to. A liaison from the Attorney General's office on a speaker in the middle of the table. They went around. My sister had a folder now and she used the word transparency 5 times. My aunt said the family was very close. When it came to me, I put one sheet of paper on the table and turned it around so it faced the caseworker. I had written it by hand the night before and typed it in the morning so it would look like a document, because paper is the only language that room speaks. The first paragraph declined. I do not seek custody. I am not petitioning for placement, visitation orders, guardianship, or any role in the determination of where this child lives. I will not be an alternative in this proceeding. I watched my sister's shoulders come down 2 inches when the caseworker read that out. She'd come in ready to fight the war, she understood. The second paragraph asked for one thing: that I be listed as the approved contact for medical supply and pharmacy coordination. Not a decision maker. The person the supplier calls when a shipment doesn't arrive. The name on the standing order. And under it, in the last line, a condition I put on myself in writing. Because a thing you promise in a room can be forgotten, and a thing you file cannot. I will not appear in any photograph, video, broadcast, or public statement in connection with this child or this case, and I ask that this restriction be made part of the record. The caseworker read that twice. Then she went to the next item, which was the safety plan, and she said that under it my mother would be off the approved caregiver list for 6 months and could see him only with a supervisor present. My mother said, "For what? I've never—" The caseworker said the SUV had been purchased with funds now subject to an accounting order and that the county doesn't place children with people who are named in one. My mother looked across that table at me like I had signed the form myself. My aunt reached over and held her hand. Somewhere under all that, a pen kept moving on a legal pad, writing down what each of us had said we were. In January, the money came back up. Not a lot of it. The platform's refunds had gone out to the donors it could reach. Card refunds, mostly, small amounts landing back in strangers' accounts 9 months later with a line item nobody would understand. But some of it couldn't be reached. Expired cards, closed accounts, cash in a jar on a diner counter, and the $11,300 was sitting frozen in a credit union inside a supermarket, going nowhere, earning 14 cents a month. So the court asked the question courts ask, which is the most boring possible version of the most important thing: where does the residual go? Lawyers propose things. The state has a fund for that. The hospital's foundation put in a line. The caseworker, who had said maybe 9 words all morning, said one more. She said the child is 7 and he will be 8 this month. And in 2 years he is going to read the file, and somebody in this room should be able to tell him he was asked. His birthday is the 26th of January. There was no party at my mother's. There was no party at his mother's either, because she works nights now and Tuesdays are hard. The old woman offered her house, 9 people. A kitchen in Columbus with a radiator that knocks, a grocery store cake with too much frosting, and a shoebox on the counter that nobody had put away. She had told him about the girl in the picture 2 weeks before that, in her own words, at that same table, with the photograph in her hands. She did not soften it, and she did not decorate it. She told him a 9-year-old had been sick in that room in 1994 and had not come home, and that the picture was of her, and that his mother had used it, and that none of it was his fault. He asked one question. He asked if the girl had a sister. She said no. She said the girl was the sister. When the cake came out, the old woman went around the table and pulled a chair out at the head of it and stood behind it and looked at me. 31 years of carrying flowers into rooms and standing by the door. I did not know what to do with my hands. Then the boy got up out of his own chair, dragged it 4 feet across the linoleum with both arms, and jammed it in beside mine, and sat down in it, and put his elbows on the table like the matter was closed. Nobody had asked him to do that. Somebody had a phone out, and I turned my face away from it, and the old woman said very calmly, "No pictures at this table," and the phone went into a pocket. Later, when the plates were stacked, the lawyer's question came around to him. The court had put a date on that question, the child's own wishes on the record before the end of the month, and the caseworker had asked to take it here instead of in the county building back in Dayton, because a 7-year-old tells you the truth in a kitchen and not across a conference table. She cleared the drive with her supervisor. She logged it as a scheduled contact and wrote the time she arrived at the top of her form before she took her coat off. The caseworker did it right. She crouched down so she wasn't above him, and she explained that there was some money that had been given for him that couldn't go back to the people who gave it, and that a judge wanted to know what he thought should happen to it. He asked if it was a lot. She said it was some. He asked if he could think, and she said yes, and he thought for about a minute and a half while 8 adults pretended to be busy. There was a get well card lying face down on the table next to the shoebox. The old woman keeps a stack of them, blank, because she sends one to every family that writes. He turned it over. He pushed the frosting plate out of the way, and he wrote on the back of it with a pencil, slowly, the way a 7-year-old writes when it matters, and he handed it to the caseworker with both hands. 6 words, for the girl in the picture. Nobody said anything. He looked around at all of us, and his face changed, because he was 7 and he had just read the room and gotten it wrong in the only direction a child can get it wrong. "Is it enough," he said, "for her to get better?" I thought she was alive. He thought she was somewhere in a bed in a room with sailboats on the curtain, still 9, still sick, and that the money could go to her and she could be helped, because that is what money for sick children is for. And nobody had told him the part where it was already too late by 24 years before he was born. The old woman put both hands over her mouth. I got him a glass of water he didn't ask for. It took me a while to fill it. She said the girl's name out loud at that table. First and middle, the way you'd write it on a school folder. The way it was written on an envelope that came back to me in July with a torn corner and a stamp that said, "No such addressee." She hadn't said it aloud in front of another person in a very long time. You could hear that in how she said it, carefully, like something she was carrying with both arms. I am not going to say it here. Not once, not at the end, not ever. She is not a name for strangers to have. She is the girl in the picture. The judge signed the order in February. My mother was in that order too. She had never signed a form or written a word. But the SUV had been bought with money the accounting reached, and the court did the boring thing courts do, which is follow the money into whatever it turned into. Whenever that vehicle sold, whatever was left after the loan on it was paid off went into the residual, and she was not a party who got to argue about it. So the residual, the 11,300, plus what came back unclaimed, plus what was left of an SUV after a lender took its half, came to a little over 19,000 in the end, and all of it went to the Foundation's supply program. Sensors, pumps, test strips, the co-pays that insurance calls patient responsibility. The program didn't have a name before, it has one now. It was named by a boy who cannot spell it, on the back of a get well card in pencil. Supervised visits ran Tuesdays and Saturdays at a center on Salem Avenue with beanbags and a 2-way window. On the 13th of March, I picked him up at the end of one. She walked him out to the car, which she was allowed to do with the supervisor at the door. She was talking the whole way about a trip they'd take when all of this was over, somewhere with a pool. He stopped at the car door with his hand on the handle. I didn't shout. He is not a shouter. He said it at the volume you use to tell somebody their shoe is untied. I'm not sick the way you said I was. Then he opened the door, got in, pulled the belt across, and clicked it. She stood on the curb with her mouth slightly open and her hands still up. I drove. He turned the radio on himself, the station with no talking, and about a mile later he asked what was for dinner. The consent judgment was entered on the 2nd of April. She agreed to it because the alternative was a trial in the civil case on top of the one she already has coming, and her lawyer told her what everybody's lawyer tells them. In plain terms, she is barred for the rest of her life from asking the public for a single dollar for any cause in the state of Ohio, and from ever being an officer, trustee, or signer for any charity here. No committee, no cash box, no page, no jar. Permanently. It's in a database that any nonprofit checks before it lets you near the money. Restitution, joint and several, which means she and her fiancé and my aunt each owe all of it until it's paid, and the first one with money pays. And a trial date in the criminal case in Montgomery County, set for the fall, on charges built out of a 9-digit number that was never hers. Afterward, in the hallway, the liaison from the Attorney General's office caught up with me by the elevators. She had a banker's box on her hip. She's maybe 60. She said she wanted to tell me something that isn't in any of the paperwork. She said, "For 2 years you drove that child to appointments, you signed as the responsible party, you paid a hospital balance in 11 installments, and there is not one line in this entire file that records any of it, because nobody writes down the person who pays." She said, "In every one of these cases, there is somebody like you, and they never get put on the page." I said thank you. It came out wrong. It came out about an octave off. The elevator opened, and she got in, and she said one more thing as the doors were closing, and I heard it all the way down the parking garage stairs. 8 months after the morning I turned left at that counter. It is June again, and here's where everybody landed. My sister is 27. She is barred for life from asking the public for money in this state and from holding any position that touches a charity's cash, which she found out means she cannot run the concession stand at a ball field. She owes restitution jointly with 2 other people and pays it in a monthly amount set by the court that will outlast the boy's childhood. Her criminal trial is in the fall. She still has her son. I want to be clear about that because people expect the other ending. The county's plan is reunification with services, and she is doing them. Parenting classes on Tuesdays, a diabetes management course she has now completed twice, unannounced home visits, a log she has to keep of every dose. She works nights at a distribution center off Webster Street. She has no page to post on anymore. That's the part she talks about. Not the money, not the trial, 214 posts and then nothing, and no way to tell anybody how hard it all is. Her fiancé is 30 and is not her fiancé. The agency dissolved on the 30th of October, with 14 months left on a studio lease. A lease he personally guaranteed. He shoots real estate listings now for a broker out of Xenia, on someone else's equipment. His name is in a civil complaint filed by the Attorney General of Ohio, and that document is public, and it is the second thing that comes up when you type his name, and it will be there in 10 years when somebody's HR department types it. My aunt is 54. She is jointly liable for the restitution, which took her savings and a piece of the equity in her house. She is at the parish every Sunday, and she is on no committee. The festival runs again next month, and the folding table by the gate will have 2 women at it, and neither of them will be her. Nobody says anything to her about it. Nobody has to. She wrote the word treasurer under her name one time, at a card table, for a niece she wanted to be proud of. My mother is 55, and the SUV sold in March for $11,000 less than she paid for it, and she did not keep a dollar of what it brought. The court had spoken for that money before the sign ever went in the back window. She drives a hatchback with 190,000 miles on it, and she does not talk about the difference. Her 6 months came up at the start of this month, and she sees him every other Saturday now, with no supervisor in the room. She sends me a text on the 1st of every month. It always says the same 4 words, "Thinking of you today." I always answer. Neither of us has said the other thing yet, and I have stopped needing her to go first. The woman with the flowers is 76, 77 at the end of the month. She still writes the checks by hand, at her kitchen table, on a Sunday, one at a time, because she says a check you type is a bill and a check you write is a letter. She still reads every one of the notes that comes back and puts it in the shoebox. This year there is somebody sitting next to her while she does it. I drive up on the 3rd Sunday. She reads them out loud and I do the envelopes. And about every fourth one she stops in the middle and says, "Oh, this one," and reads it again from the top. The thank you album is on the shelf behind her, where she can see it from that chair, 406 frames off a photographer's card, culled down to 31, one for every year she carried flowers into other people's rooms and stood by the door. She is in every one of them. It took me until April to finish it, because I kept having to put it down. High as 8. He leaves for camp the last week of July, up by Bellefontaine, cabin 4. The packing list has been on his wall since April. He still wears the lanyard from the first year, 11 pins on it, and he can tell you the correction factor for a slice of birthday cake. There's a sensor on the back of his arm. He wears short sleeves on purpose. His A1C, the morning they admitted him at 5 years old, was 9.8. In November it was 9.8 again. At his June appointment, it was 7.4, and the nurse practitioner turned the screen around so he could see the number, and he said, "That's better than 7.2?" And she had to explain that lower is the good direction, and he said he'd get it, and I believe him. The Foundation Supply Program, the one with a name on it that a boy wrote in pencil, bought him a trike in April. Adaptive frame, trunk support, foot cages. It came on a truck, and 2 men carried it up the driveway in a box the size of a door. I brought a screwdriver from my kitchen drawer, and the thing I'd been keeping in that drawer since September, wrapped in a paper towel. The little brass bell, tarnished, with the nick out of the dome. It took 4 minutes to get it onto the new handlebar. He didn't say anything while I did it. He stood there with his hands behind his back like an inspector. Then he rang it twice on purpose and looked at me. He rides it up and down the block in the evenings when the heat breaks. And he rings that bell at the mail truck, and the mail truck honks back every single time, which is the kind of thing that happens in Ohio in June and nowhere else. He says he's going to drive that truck. Not the mail truck. The other one. The one that brought the box up the driveway. Hy told me the whole plan while we were sitting on the curb with the sprinkler going 2 yards down. He is going to drive the box truck, and he is going to be the one who carries the boxes to the door. And the reason is that when he was little, a box came to his house from the sky, and he never found out who sent it, and he wants to be the guy the kid sees. I said that sounded like a good job. The street light at the end of the block came on while he was still talking, the way it does around 9, and out past the last driveway. The corn was already over the fence line, and a train went through somewhere east of us, and pulled its horn twice at the crossing on Gebhardt Church Road, and he rang the bell back at it, and we sat there on the curb until the mosquitoes found us, and his mother's porch light came on, and he walked home. I've been telling you this for a while now, so let me put down the last thing. I spent a lot of years believing the thing being taken from me was money. $420 for flowers. $900 on a Tuesday. 11 installments on a hospital balance. $130 in 20s at a counter at 7 in the morning. It wasn't the money. I could always make more money. I'm good at my job and I work a lot of hours. What she took was 2 years of being told that the paying wasn't a kind of love, that it was just what I was for. A wallet with legs. A woman who counts pills all day. The one you call when the bill comes and never the one you call when there's good news. And I let her tell me that, because the alternative was a house with no roof and a kid still under it. So here is my question for you tonight, and I'd genuinely like the answer. Are you the one in your family who pays? The one who drives, who signs, who takes the afternoon off, who gets the call at 10 at night and gets it done by morning, and has never once heard anybody say out loud that it counted? Tell me in the comments. Tell me what you paid for, and who let you. I read them. I read every single one of them, usually late, usually with the kitchen light on, and I answer more of them than you'd think. Thank you for staying with me all the way out here. It matters more than I know how to say. I'll see you in the next one.